Hi, my name is Marissa Torres, and my chosen topic for my individual professional presentation is immigration law. Among many controversial topics in the United States, immigration law is an ongoing discussion along with all it entails, such as deportation, how it affects families, how it affects our society as a whole. To start off, I will talk about the four categories of immigration statuses within the U.S. These categories include legal permanent residents, conditional residents, non-immigrants, and undocumented. The first of these are legal permanent residents, otherwise known as LPRs for short. These individuals are granted a permanent residential card, also known as the green card, as many others say it. It states that you are legally allowed to work and live in the U.S., receiving health care, ability to get a driver's license, and basically all the other rights of becoming a U.S. citizen, making them a legal documented U.S. citizen. Conditional residents are those couples whom have been married for less than 2 years and still receive their permanent residential card or their green card. Eventually, when they hit their 2-year anniversary, they must refile for their permanent residential card in order to remain living in the U.S. as a U.S. citizen and permanently. Without doing so, they risk many things such as deportation back to their home countries and many other risks. Non-immigrants are granted a temporary visa for things such as school, work, recently engaged to a U.S. citizen, tourism, or temporary protection. These individuals apply for their visa, of course, for their many different reasons, and although they are each distinct in their own way, the process of receiving one is all the same background checks, the same screening, same everything. And they all mean the same thing, that you are residing within the U.S. for a limited amount of time temporarily. It is a common scenario in the United States when a immigrant on a temporary visa stays longer than intended. At this point, they become an undocumented U.S. citizen, which is what I will talk about next. Lastly, undocumented immigrants that are in the U.S. illegally, they have usually when an undocumented immigrant gets to the U.S., it is one of two ways. It is either by a temporary visa and they ended up staying longer than intended, or they usually entered into the U.S. at an unofficial access point. These individuals are restricted of health care, the ability to apply for a driver's license, and many other things such as work legally and receive all the rights as a regular U.S. citizen. On my recent trip to New York City, I was able to visit the Ellis Island National Museum of Immigration. I would like to point out that all the pictures from Ellis Island on my slideshow are taken either by my roommate, Tori Hendrickson, or myself while being on this trip a couple of weeks ago. Ellis Island was very, very interesting. It was very educational. It intrigued me to see how many immigrants from so many different countries in the world wanted to become U.S. citizens and the things that they had to do in order to become one. Many screenings, many medical exams, so many things that they had to do just for the hope of being in the promised land, wanting to live the American dream, wanting to pursue a better life for their family. According to History.com, it is estimated that close to 40% of all U.S. population can trace at least one of their ancestors back to Ellis Island, which is amazing. That's such a huge percentage of our population came through these doors. Their ancestors have come through the doors of Ellis Island in order to become U.S. citizens and make a better life for their family. Like I said, upon arriving at accesses, many different medical examinations that they had to go through in order to want to become a U.S. citizen. The picture to the very left is me in the waiting room of Ellis Island, where the immigrants would first walk through the doors and they would be sat in these benches, which I got to sit in as well, to where they wanted to wait until their name was called in order to get their paperwork going and get the process going. The two pictures in the middle are tags, I guess you can say. When they went through their medical examinations, they had to, if the doctors found any red flags, they would tag the immigrants on their clothing with a piece of chalk with some of these symbols, and it showed the different types of symbols that they use for different things. So the X stood for mental illness, or something other stood for eye complications. They were very specific. The picture to the far right was some luggage from some immigrants that were left there at Ellis Island. It shows a family whom had traveled to New York in the hopes of becoming a US citizen. Okay, the next pictures are very interesting. They would go through not only medical, physical exams, but also mental testing as well. The picture in the far left top corner was a mental exam in order to see if the immigrants could draw a simple diamond. The picture on the bottom left was a courtroom in which some immigrants had to have hearings in order for their application to be processed and approved. The picture in the middle at the top is the process that they had to go through in orders. And the two pictures to the right were just like an old cash register and money that they had to exchange in order to get US currency. So like I said, that the immigrants had to go through multiple tests, such as mental testing, physical tests, and all of these where these pictures were used for, obviously, medical exams. The mental testing showed what kind of questions they asked, what kind of tests they had to do. In the middle is a wheelchair from back then, and then to the right are some medical tools in which some doctors had to use for their physical. So if it is estimated about a couple hours, 80% of everyone who came through the doors each day would be screened, saw, and approved within a few hours. For the other remaining 20%, it took longer to fulfill their applications. And in order to do so, they resided within the island. So one of the pictures shows the little bunkers that they had to sleep in when they had to stay within the island. Immigration now. There are an estimated 11 million undocumented immigrants that are residing within the U.S. illegally. A large percent of these undocumented illegals entered into the U.S. with a temporary visa, such as I stated earlier. Then they stayed longer than arranged, causing them to add to the undocumented population in the U.S. The remaining percentage entered into the U.S. by unofficial access points. There are multiple ways to get a permanent or temporary visa to reside within the U.S. The first step in which is to start the immigrant visa process. This can be done so by contacting an immigration lawyer in order to get your specific individual process started. Deportation. With recent stories being brought up, it is difficult to see families separate due to the deportation of a family member. With undocumented illegals being in the U.S. for years, it's easy to say that they have had their children within the U.S., and since they are born in the U.S., they are legal U.S. citizens. There are many complications when it comes to these situations due to being such a complex subject. Depending on the situation, it's different for all cases. There are other situations where it may be considered inhumane to deport an individual who traveled to the U.S. for the sole purpose of safety. Many immigrants come to America wanting to leave their home countries because they are unsafe due to religious beliefs, war, or even genocide. Next, I will be talking about the potential wall. The topic of building a wall around the U.S. border has been a major possibility since the election of our newest president. According to CNN, President Trump wants to build a wall to stop dangerous drugs and criminals from pouring into our country. Many believe that it will reduce the number of illegal immigrants that migrate through the borders of Mexico and Canada. It will allow the government to choose who enters into the U.S. more selectively, efficiently, and securely. It also slows down the risk of overpopulation, making it harder for immigrants to come into the U.S. illegally. This would be forcing them to enter into the country the legal way. The effect of immigrants on the USA. Pros. Many believe that immigrants are what make America so great and so unique and so diverse, which is very common considering how diverse the U.S. is. Most of which migrate to the U.S. to work and provide a better life for their family. Many immigrants are willing to work the hard manual labor jobs to provide for their family and to live what is known as the American dream. Even if that includes becoming a blue-collar worker. With more immigrants becoming legal U.S. citizens, gaining jobs, and contributing to society, it enhances the U.S. economy tremendously. These immigrants are wanting to become U.S. citizens legally. It just makes society better as a whole. The effect of immigrants on the USA. Cons. Although there are many pros to the controversy of immigration, as with anything, there are risks as well. Some of these risks may include threat of drugs, crime, even the threat of terrorism. With more people entering the country, there are possibilities of other things coming with them, such as the possibilities I said earlier. Granted that these possibilities weren't in question, there is also the geographical aspect as well. With more and more people migrating to the U.S., there is a major possibility of overpopulation, making resources limited. This can also lead to the depletion of natural resources at an increasingly unstable rate. In conclusion, immigration is a very complex, very distinct topic that is very controversial within the United States, as will it always be. It's all about making what is best for our country, what is best for our nation's people, everything. And it will always be one of the biggest discussions of law, as well as many other aspects to it.